All right, we're live. All right, everyone, welcome to the stream tonight. The stream team said they weren't going tonight, so we served up something extra special for you. And we got Dr. Robyn Underwood from the Penn State University Extension, right? I have to use the extension. And of course, everybody knows Brad here. And we're going to let well, first of all, we'll just ask you, what is your presentation on tonight, Dr. Underwood?
It's going to be on some work that we did looking at different honeybee colony management systems. So first, I'm going to tell you about a paper where we studied beekeepers to ask them about their management and how they define themselves. And then we decided to go ahead and look at their results of their survey questions in a side-by-side comparison. So this is funded by USDA NIFA OREI, which is sort of an organic program. And yeah, we're really proud of the results and excited to share.
So the first thing you had to do was take a beekeeper psychological profiles. Will you share that study with us? Because that would be very interesting.
Yeah, actually, Extension is quite interested in studying, sociology and how you get people to change their ways. Beekeepers are very stubborn.
No,
not us. Never, ever. Yeah. Well, I don't see your slide presentation at the bottom. So if you want to pop that up, we'll add it. And Brad and I will drop to the background. And guys, as you're asking questions in the chat, we're going to star them and we will answer them after the presentation. By we mean Dr. Underwood. I have nothing to contribute.
I'm sure you will, actually.
Oh, well, unfortunately, you know me. All right, so I'm going to add the slideshow here, Brad, and then you and I can dip out of here.
Sounds good.
And let her take it away.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about a project that we call Comb, and it has nothing to do with the wax comb in the hives. It has to do with conventional and organic management of bees. And so, we all know that there's a lot of different stressors on our bees from, the placement of them and what pesticides they might be getting into, to the acaricides that we as beekeepers are putting into the hives, to the climate and weather, diseases, viruses, all kinds of things that can affect your bees and their health and how productive they are. And as a beekeeper, I feel like there's one thing under my control, and that is my practices. So that is what I'm very passionate about studying. I really like answering beekeepers' questions, and I'm the boots on the ground. I like being in the bees, sweating, getting stung, lifting heavy boxes. I don't just like to be in my office, and I really don't like being in the lab. So luckily I have a great team of people who can do that lab work for me and give me interesting results to share with you to see how your practices are impacting your bees. So I did my PhD work in Manitoba, Canada, and then I came to Pennsylvania, which happens to be where I was born and raised, but I wasn't a beekeeper here until after I went to graduate school. And so when I came back to Pennsylvania, I started going to bee club meetings to try to get to know beekeepers in my area. And what I saw was that there are some very different types of beekeepers. And in fact, at these meetings, they were not getting along. They didn't like what each other was saying. And so in my mind, as a scientist, I started to try to understand them. And I realized that the problem was these, beekeepers that weren't saying the same things or doing the same things or agreeing had different philosophies. So I started to define that. So what is a philosophy? In general, it's an attitude or system of thought that acts as a guiding principle for your behavior. But in beekeeping, it's really your idea about what your role is as the beekeeper, right? So are you going to be in there intervening, doing things, moving frames around, whatever, requeening regularly, or are you a hands-off beekeeper? These are completely different ways of beekeeping, and they're based on philosophy. And I've also come to learn that it has to do a lot with that human's philosophy toward the medical system, right? And that's something for a future study if I ever want to study humans again. The other thing I do is I'm part of some beginning beekeeping classes, and people come in really with a philosophy, but they don't realize it. And they don't realize when they're learning about beekeeping that some of the things they learn may not align with their philosophy. And they may get paired up with a mentor that has a completely different philosophy. So this sort of continuum was a lot of time and a lot of discussions with a lot of people to just try to put a picture to this idea. And so if you like this figure, you can use it. It's part of one of the papers that is a link that you're going to get when you read about this in writing instead of hearing me talk. This figure actually is something you're allowed to use as you wish. So you could, print it out for your club to having discussions or whatever you want. You can use it in any way you like. So I want you to understand it. So what you're seeing here is a list of things that you as a beekeeper need to make decisions about. So, for example, the first section here at the top is your use of chemicals. And that means what are you going to put into the hive on purpose for a reason? And then going from left to right, we have how much of an intervention is that? So for varroa mite treatments, if you're going to be using chemicals, the lowest type of intervention is to say, no, absolutely not. I'm never putting chemicals in my hive. Then we move farther to the right, and at the medium, we have our essential oils. Moving up a little higher, we have our acids, so organic acids, formic and oxalic acid. And then farthest to the right is the synthetic chemicals. And I feel that those are the highest intervention. Number one, because they're long treatments. Putting apivar strips in your hive is 42 days. Then you have a 2-week session where you cannot put your supers on, and that chemical is getting into your wax for the long term. So that's a high degree of intervention because it's not a natural chemical, and it's long lasting and causes residues. Then we move down, you can see some other chemical uses, and then we go to hive manipulations. So for varroa mites, are you doing cultural controls? Well, if you're not, then no, low intervention. If you have a screen bottom board, mites are just falling through passively. Then we get to the highest level of intervention, which is small cell comb, because you're fundamentally changing the structure of the hive and the size of the workers. So that's a pretty high intervention. How often do you replace your queen? On. And then what are you willing to feed your bees? All of these things are on a continuum. And when I teach beginning beekeeping, a lot of times most of the time, the answer to their question is, well, that depends, or it's personal preference, right? So there's so many things that you can do. So if you were to hand this out to everyone in your bee club and ask them to circle, what do you do? So what chemicals are they willing to use for varroa mites and small hive beetles? Are they treating for nosema, using antibiotics, et cetera, all the way down? What you're going to end up with is something like this. And what you have shown now on paper is something called your colony management system. So if you're regularly making these same decisions year after year, you're kind of set in your ways and you have a system. And so when I talk today about a beekeeping philosophy, I'm going to define those next. And then about your honeybee colony management system, it's all of these cumulative decisions that you're making, including the equipment that your bees are in, what you're feeding them, and why you're keeping bees, right? What is your goal? And I'm sure you can imagine there's a whole range. This management system that you see now is going to be the organic management system that I talk about later. You might be surprised to see that the circles are some are on the left, some are in the middle, and some are on the right. So it's not that there's like a low intervention beekeeper that does nothing ever and a high intervention beekeeper that does everything all the time. It bounces all around. And so I'd love for you to contemplate what your management system is after this. So we studied beekeepers using survey results from the Bee Informed Partnership. So they had their national survey, and we used some data from 1 year where they had this huge management survey. So you did your first 10 questions of, colony losses. And then if you continued, there was like 80 some questions about management. And we broke beekeepers down into 3 categories or philosophies. And that was based on a single question where the beekeeper basically was self-identifying that, there were 5 answers to the question, but we smushed them down into 3. So the philosophies are conventional, where the person responded to the survey, gave management decisions like I use Apivar, I use antibiotics, etc. Then there was the organic category or philosophy, and they, were willing to use naturally derived chemicals. So in this case, that's, formic acid, oxalic acid, and essential oils, but not using antibiotics. And they always avoided those synthetics. And then there was this whole category, and I don't even know what to call it, all natural, treatment-free, chemical-free, whatever you want to call it. We settled on the name chemical-free. I don't really like it, but that's what we call it for all of these studies. No chemicals were ever put into the hives ever. So this is kind of how we broke down the beekeepers based on one certain question. Then we looked at their management decisions that they reported. So the results are in these weird PCA diagrams. So I'm just going to describe this one to you, and then you can follow the next few. So basically, the topic for this graph is supplemental feeding. And you're going to see dots appear all over the screen, and they're color-coded. So the all natural or chemical-free or treatment-free beekeeper answers are the red dots. The people that were in the organic category are the green dots, and conventional is the blue dots. So throughout this whole talk, you're going to see those colors repeating, and they're always going to be the same. There's like an orangey red for chemical-free, green for organic, and like blue or purple for conventional. Okay, so remember, each dot is a beekeeper. And so what did we see about feeding? So what you can see here is on the left-hand side, clustering together, are the conventional beekeepers. And what you can see in the words written there are that they're willing to feed their bees any carbohydrates. So they said, yes, I feed high fructose corn syrup, I'll use invert syrup, whatever. And also they're more likely to be feeding protein in the form of pollen patties. So then all the way to the right, then we have our all natural beekeepers who are going not to give them supplemental feeding of protein, but assuming they'll find it on their own, not feeding them sugar syrup, but only feeding them honey, etc. So their management matched their philosophy in terms of feeding. So then we looked at the same group. So what did they do then in terms of their goals? So why are they keeping bees, right? And so again, they grouped together, and where the conventional beekeepers are keeping bees, to try to make some money. They want to sell honey. They want to sell bees. We have organic in the middle and the all natural on the right, where they probably don't even harvest honey. The point of keeping bees is for teaching or pollination of their own garden or whatever. So again, looking at their philosophy based on their goals. So we also explored the size of the operation. So it's quite a different beekeeping feat to keep 5,000 colonies versus 50 versus 2, right? So here we have their color-coded by size now. So we have backyard beekeepers, that's up to 50 colonies. Sideliners are 50 to 500, and if more than 500, you're commercial. Okay, so what kind of management were they doing? Well, interestingly, commercial beekeepers are all, doing similar things. They're gonna be using those synthetic like Apivar strips or treating for nosema. They may be using antibiotics. Organic beekeepers, beekeepers with an organic philosophy are here in the middle. I'm sorry, I just said the wrong thing. Sideliners. This is not based on that. So commercial is large apiaries, large numbers of colonies. Sideliners are in the middle. But look at what backyard beekeepers are doing. they're doing everything. So it's spread wide across all of these. So a whole section of these beekeepers here to the left of this middle line are doing just the same thing as a commercial beekeeper. And all the way to the right. So there's like beekeepers that have less than 50 colonies are quite diverse in what they're doing. So this was staggering to me, and it totally explains why at the beekeeper meetings there was diversity of thought on what to do in certain situations. I bet if you had a whole room full of commercial beekeepers, they would all be like, yeah, do this, right? But for backyard beekeepers, crazy range of things that they're doing. So, of course, each of those beekeepers thinks they're doing what is best. They think they're doing what's keeping their bees the healthiest. So I wanted to, show me the data. Sometimes people say that's my middle name. I want research. I want to see science. I want to see that somebody actually tried all three of these side by side in the same location with the same food, same genetics, all those things to see how well the bees did. So did the bees stay healthy and live through the winter? Did they make lots of honey, etc.? So we got a grant from USDA NIFA to do this project. And we acted, I just want you to remember this, we acted like full-size, we used full-size honey producing colonies, and we tried to act like a sideliner beekeeper. So we had nothing migratory, we didn't have any pollination contracts, and we were also not breeders. So I'm going to talk about breeding, here at the end, because breeding is different than keeping bees to make honey. Okay, so this is all full-size colonies. We're not chopping them up. We want to make the biggest, best colonies we can to make as much honey as possible. And then we want excellent overwintering. Those were kind of our goals. So again, we had these three philosophies. We had conventional, which you can do anything you want. Getting a little smaller from there, we have organic, where you're still treating with chemicals, but not synthetics or antibiotics. And then we have the chemical-free group, no chemicals, no matter what. And we luckily got the money later in 2017 and weren't starting until 2018. So we actually had lots of time to think through what we were going to do and how to do it best. So we invited the top beekeepers from across my state, which is Pennsylvania, and we got them all into a room for a whole entire day. And we sat them down and we told them all about the project in detail, what we were planning, and then we made them choose our management. So we sat the conventional beekeepers down together, the organic beekeepers down together, and the treatment-free beekeepers together. We were like, if we were doing a study, what would you do? What would you feed them? What kind of bottom board would you have? Would you use a queen excluder? When would you treat? What would you treat with, etc.? So these stakeholders really shaped our protocols. We had very strict protocols of what to do when and how to respond to mites and things like that. So these stakeholders also then, as a result, we met with them about every 6 months. They were on the front lines. Many of them were asked to come out to the apiaries and see it for themselves. And they always got the data first. So they were in the know and really loved that. So here's what was decided that day. I'm going to focus first on the top half of this table. And this is about the equipment that the bees were in. So this was all 10 frame Langstroth equipment. They started new with undrawn comb. So that first day there was zero wax, just wooden frames with plastic foundation. And so again, remember, we're doing 3 management systems: conventional, organic, and chemical free. So the first thing was the size of the imprints of the hexagons on that foundation. So for conventional organic, it was just standard comb that we can buy, from a commercial place. And those hexagons were 5.4 millimeters. For chemical free, they insisted on having small cell comb, which has imprints of 4.9 millimeters. And by the way, they were quite disturbed by the plastic, but we insisted on doing the same thing for each system. And we wanted to make sure that those bees built out the cells the size that we had expected. And so we did end up, after a year or two, going in and measuring some cells, and they did measure properly even after they were built out by the bees. So the conventional beekeepers chose to have a screened bottom board. So it would be open from, say, April through October and close off for the winter. Organic and chemical-free had solid bottom boards. In terms of allowing drone comb, for conventional, everything was standard comb throughout. For organic, we had one frame in each brood box that was a drone frame. And for that, we did drone brood removal. So this was a very large scale project. So we weren't able to put them in the freezer and return them. But we did, whenever we saw capped drone brood on those drone frames, we would scrape them off and remove that from the site. So we were essentially doing drone trapping, mite trapping using drone brood. And for the chemical-free system, we basically cut out an inch on each side of the foundation so that it was just empty, and then the bees could choose what to build in there. And by and large, they did build drone comb in there. And that was based on the idea that, honeybees want to build drone comb, so we should just let them. And that was never cut out. It was just part of, the colony. And then we used a wooden inner cover, which one of my favorite things now are these wintering covers. It has the 2-inch spacer built in. Loved them, by the way, very useful. But for chemical free, we really wanted to encourage the propolis envelope. So there's been some really good research showing that propolis is very medicinal and that the bees will be able to care for themselves that way. So we not only used a cloth inner cover, so it's this stuff called cotton duck. So it was basically cloth cut the size of an inner cover and laid on the top bars. They really propolized that. And then we also took all the brand new boxes and used a metal, I don't even know what it's called. Someone else did this for us, but totally scratched up the insides of all the boxes to encourage them to put propolis on the insides so that they would have propolis everywhere. Okay, so conventional, it doesn't say it on here, but so screen bottom board, a queen excluder in place, standard comb, 5.4 millimeters. Organic had a solid bottom board. We used drone brood removal and standard frames. Chemical free, small cell comb, solid bottom board, 10% cut out so they could build what they wanted, and encouragement of the propolis envelope. So this is how we set everything up. Then in the first year, in terms of treatments, we were pretty nervous about the packages coming with lots of mites because the year previous, lots of beekeepers reporting that their packages came with crazy numbers of mites. So we did an oxalic acid dribble in the first week after installation. Pretty much we found no mites. So that wouldn't have been necessary, but we didn't know. For conventional, you're going to see this over and over again. Every colony gets a fall treatment with Amitraz, no matter what. For organic, they got a fall treatment with Formic Pro pads, no matter if they had too many mites or not. And of course, no chemicals and chemical free. We then went through and did an oxalic acid vapor one time in winter, like around Christmas, in both conventional and organic. And in terms of what they ate, every colony, whenever they were fed liquid, they got ProSweet, which is invert syrup that we can buy from Man Lake. It's a glorious product that I don't have to mix myself. Really thick syrup, similar to honey. It also doesn't go bad in the field, so it's not like you're dumping it down the drain because you left it sit. Anyway, for winter, then of course we tried to have 60 pounds of liquid feed in the comb, but then come January, we would add emergency solid food. So for conventional, that was a candy board with 3% pollen. For organic, it was just dry sugar or slightly moistened, sucrose crystals. And it says here dry sugar if needed for chemical free, but pretty much no one ever needed to be fed. So that was brand new colonies on foundation. The second year, when we have mature colonies, it was a little different. The mites had built up and they had lots of comb available. So we had a different system. And so for the second year and third year, we would monitor mites every month. And if one colony in that treatment, in that apiary, got over 1%, we would treat all the colonies in that apiary the same way. So early on in the year, we would use oxalic acid vapor. Later on, we would switch over to Formic Pro. And then in fall, again, conventional would get Apivar. And organic, because we were very concerned with rotating chemicals, they would get what they got for fall treatment would depend on what happened over the summer. So if we used oxalic acid and then Formic and Formic a second time, we absolutely wouldn't use it a third time. We would switch over to Apiguard, which is your Thymol treatment. If they hadn't gotten Formic yet, because they never got over the threshold, then in fall they would get Formic. But basically the organic system would rotate oxalic acid, Formic acid, and Thymol as needed when they get over threshold, except everybody got treated in fall. Okay, I hope that all makes sense. I know that's a lot and really boring slides, but we have to just kind of understand these management systems. So here's a summary of all that. So you can see the setup with the equipment. You can see whether they had a screened or solid bottom board. You can see the drone brood in organic. You see the queen excluder. And then at the bottom is sort of our calendar of events for when treatments would occur. And this does appear in the other paper that describes this research if you want to have a different look at it. Okay, so this work took place in both Pennsylvania and West Virginia. Each star is a farm. So there's 8 farms, and they are all organic, certified organic farms because the granting agency insists that all of their work occurs on organic farms. And so each farm then had 3 apiaries. You can see here on the right, 1, 2, 3. And then within each apiary, there were 12 colonies. 4 started in 2018 as chemical free, 4 would be conventional, and 4 would have the organic management system. And what I want you to notice is that the order of those from left to right, in these south-facing apiaries varied, because we all know bees drift, and we didn't want some treatments to always be on the ends to receive and get stronger and the middle one to suffer. So in a region, so say, central PA, there's actually 6 possibilities for left, middle, right. And so there was 1 of each in the region. Okay, so the bees arrived in April 2018 as packages from Georgia, as Pennsylvania beekeepers do to start new colonies. And I'll just keep going. Then later in the summer, we requeened all of those colonies. So we would have loved to start with 300 treatment-free best genetics packages, but you can't very well ask a beekeeper like that to create that when they didn't know until November 2017, and they would have been needed in April 2018, right? It's winter. So we did the next best thing, which was get Georgia packages, get them to build comb for us and build up. And then we replaced all the queens in every single colony with sister queens. So these were bred by a beekeeper in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, Devin Paderewski. And he had a colony that lived in a soffit of a house for 4 years, then totally unmanaged, untreated. He then did a cutout and put it in normal equipment for 3 more years, untreated, and they survived. So we did not know if or what mite resistance traits they may have, but we knew that they were surviving, without any chemical treatments, because I was really, really hopeful. I really wanted to show that this chemical-free management system could be done. I know there are people doing it. I also wanted to do it. And so these are sister queens that were then open mated all in the same place. So they were as similar as possible. We really wanted to make sure that any results that we had were due to management and not due to genetics, because genetics can play a big factor. So they all had the same genetics by the end of the season in 2018. Every month from the day the packages arrived through October, and then each year, April through October, we would do an alcohol wash to monitor varroa mite levels. We also, in the fall, so this would be after all of the fall treatments, so this would be in October. This was the state of the colony for the winter. So we would do one big day where we would do a snapshot in time. We would take an alcohol wash. We took bees for nosema analysis. We took other bees for lab testing of their immune systems, their vitellogenin levels, and their viral loads to give a really nice snapshot of if this is how your colony is in October, going into winter, how likely are they going to be to survive? We also measured honey production very carefully in each individual colony because we wanted to see how much honey they were making with these management systems. And of course, overwintering success was measured. So if they were alive in October, were they also alive come April the following year? And now it's time for some results. So this is just a summary of all the 3 years together. And what you can see here is this is on a per apiary basis, so keep that in mind. And what you're seeing is sort of an average. This is in kilograms, not pounds, so you have to like double it and then some. What you're seeing is the average with the standard error. So a larger bar means there was like more variation between colonies, and a smaller bar, less variation. And there's letters on the top. So if 2 bars have the different letters, that means statistically they are different from each other. If they have the same letters, then they are statistically not different from each other. So again, these are color coded like I mentioned before. So we have our chemical free is like an orangey color, conventional is bluish purplish, and organic is green. You're going to see this over and over. And in terms of honey production, chemical free colonies made significantly less honey than both conventional and organic. So remember, chemical free had no mite management at all. Both conventional and organic did, just different types. So conventional allowed synthetics and organic did not. So this pattern of ABB, you're going to see is going to continue to repeat itself. So chemical free colonies made less honey per apiary on average over 3 years. So we did 2018 packages arrived, and we continued the study through till 2021. So that's 3 winters. What did it look like for varroa mites? Basically, the conventional and organic, if you remember my methods, I said like we would do an alcohol wash, and if they were over 1%, we would treat. So we had no problem really keeping mite levels low using that system, except we had a little blip in the fall of 2020, which we then applied oxalic acid after that. We just didn't measure the mites. So I'm certain that this went down. Without any chemical treatments, the chemical-free colonies did reach an average of 4% in the first fall, which, to be honest, I wasn't too concerned about, but you'll see what it did to survival. Then in the second year, it was far worse. We had mature colonies, with quite a lot of mites, and that repeated itself again the following fall. But I told you that we really enjoyed doing this like snapshot of October to see what it was like going into winter. And so this is what that looked like, just looking at that time period, the October washes. And here I broke it out to the 3 separate years, but you can clearly see that mite numbers were much higher in chemical free, kept plenty low here in when mite management occurred. So what did our lab testing show us? Well, it showed us that deformed wing virus, DWV, much higher, statistically higher in chemical-free colonies, lower in the other 2 management systems. Nosema was also higher in chemical-free, but only significantly more than organic. Conventional was sort of in between. So AB means not different from the one on the left, not different from the one on the right. So I'm not really sure what we did with our management that could have impacted nosema, but perhaps just overall health helped. I don't know. In terms of vitellogenin, there was no difference. So that's why you see no letters, because they were all virtually the same. And there was one important thing about the study. Having these colonies side by side meant that they all had the same foraging ability, same, food available to them. And vitellogenin is one thing that you can do to look at nutritional status of the bees. So no change. Then let's look at the immune system. So honeybees have an immune system. They have various different immune pathways. And we, looked at a part of several different immune pathways. And what you're going to see is that they all look the same. The chemical-free colonies had their immune systems reactive compared to the ones where mites were managed. So defensin 1 is one of those tests, significantly higher in chemical-free colonies. Hymenoptacin, same pattern here, different immune pathway, also excited and having to respond to something. Chemical-free, more active immune system. And then we have a third one, naked cuticle gene, same thing. So it's clear that when you're not managing mites, you're not managing viruses, and the immune system is having to react. So what did that do for overwintering survival? Well, you can see here that year after year after year, we had really horrible survival in the chemical-free colonies, and really excellent survival in the other two. So the survival using these two management systems was always 82% or higher, where at the same time, the survey results for my state were showing 40 and 50% loss on average from the beekeepers around the state. So I was very proud of these numbers, and I think they're really good management systems, except for the chemical-free. Basically, these years are snapshots of like the percentage of colonies that were alive in fall versus the following spring. But if you look at in terms of continuous colonies over time, it looks far worse. So here's colony survival. We started with 96 in each treatment. So every time there would be winter losses, it would go down and down and down. And in fact, for chemical-free, we started with 96 colonies. And by the end of 3 years, there was 1 remaining. So that was pretty dramatic and not great. And I just want to let you know, I thought it was important to share this overall survival graph with everyone because there were also summer losses, and I can totally tell you why. And it was all having to do with not requeening after a swarm or a split because, I don't know why, but every summer loss, it wasn't because mites got out of control. We didn't get swarmed with beetles, nothing else. They didn't starve. It was just a requeening problem. Okay, so to sum that all up, we have this diagram. So let me explain it to you. Basically, you saw ABB, right? So there was a difference between chemical-free system and the conventional and organic, and almost always conventional and organic were the same. So this figure is showing you that if you were a colony and you were in the conventional or organic system, you had a really good chance of survival. I know it's good because this color, this lighter color, is a positive. So being part of conventional and organic system was a positive. Red would be negative. And by the way, the thickness of that arrow is how strong that effect was. So absolutely, if you were a colony, you would not want to be part of the chemical-free system. So what did being part of this management system do to these health biomarkers? Well, the conventional and organic systems had a huge negative impact on varroa mites, meaning that, it controlled them, had an impact on nosema. This V is for Viremorpha, the new name of nosema, had a negative effect on DWV, meaning it lowered it. It lowered the immune system's reactions. So that's really cool. And then what happens then from the middle to the right, where you're looking at, well, okay, if you have more mites, it has a negative impact on your survival. If you have more nosema, that's a negative. If you have more DWV, that's a negative, etc. So this is sort of just your summary of everything that I told you. So let's look at it a little bit differently. I also am in the process of writing up a new paper about the economics of these three systems. So what does it mean for your bottom line in terms of how much money you're spending and how much money you're bringing in? And for that, we only used 4 of the farms. So 48 colonies was the goal, to have like 4 operations of 12 colonies. And in terms of survival, you can see that it was not really a problem to hover around the goal number of 48 for organic and conventional. But for chemical free, despite our best efforts, splitting, trying our best to bring those numbers back up, they just continued to go down and down because of those high overwintering losses. And so what did this mean in terms of money? Well, what you can see here in the top left are our costs. So starting brand new colonies with, buying bees and feeding this first year of 2018, lots of lost money because it's an investment year. And then the costs really diminished after that. So there was like a little bit of feeding, a little bit of money for treatments. In terms of income or revenue, really almost none in the first year. Of course, new colonies on new foundation aren't really going to make honey, and you're not going to be splitting them to sell nukes. But in the second and third year, yes, there was revenue from both of those avenues. So great honey production, and we would make splits and nukes, and if it was over 48, that would be sold. And so we made lots of money. So if this were a line graph, what you would see would be at the beginning, everybody is down because you're making an initial investment, and then the money increases over time. And what you can see is that organic has a little bit of an edge over conventional. So you would make a little bit more money. And by the way, this is using numbers with honey costing the same. Also, please note, this is not USDA certified organic honey. It is just a management system. There's still a lot of work to be done to look at the areas where the bees are kept and whether those are clean, because that's a huge part of certification, is having a vast area of land that's clean. So this is just organic honeybee colony management. So I just want to make sure I remember to say that. Okay, so let's summarize before I go to questions. I think it's critical that if your bees cannot manage mites, the beekeeper must do it. So I would love to see that people have VSH bees that are controlling mites all on their own. I'm not saying you have to use chemicals, but I do feel very strongly that mites must be monitored, because animal husbandry and animal welfare are really, really important. And I'm not okay watching bees suffer. I did do that for this project. Those chemical-free colonies in the first fall, I just knew they were dead before they were actually dead. Parasitic mite syndrome like crazy. It was really hard to watch. So I don't recommend just turning a blind eye to the fact that there are mites, because there are mites. You need to monitor them and really do something if they get out of control. It's really, very important. And then I just want to thank all the, people that worked for me and volunteered for me, and those stakeholders and everybody else that was part of this project. And I would be happy to take questions.
I will come back and add Brad back too here. And we're back. So I've been lucky, like Brad, to have seen this before. So it's not all brand new to me.
It's a little bit of an expanded version, of course, right?
Yes.
As mentioned, and I really enjoyed the extras.
Thank you.
And we brought Brian from Flower Street Farms. Brian asked to come in because he's studying for his master beekeeping certification, right? And Brian, I'll let you talk to Dr. Underwood and explain what you're doing.
Sure. So I'm in the master beekeeping program with the Colorado State Beekeeping Association, all around the UBO assay and finding VSH genetics here in the Colorado area, with a long-term goal of trying to create like a collaborative breeding program between small, like sideliner beekeepers to get that opportunity to get some of that cultural resistance of those genetic bees. That's one of those things at the bottom of the IPM pyramid that's foundational, but it's one of those hardest things to accomplish. So we're trying to build kind of a network of people here in Colorado that are working to improve the genetics of the bees in our area.
That's awesome. I'm also trying the same thing. So I run a program that's called EPIQ, EPIQ, where, teaching people to be queen producers and then teaching them how to make selections. And my goal was to get lots of sideliner queen producers, right? More, local queens. And I really hope that our next step is going to be a collaborative breeding effort, right? So, now that they understand good animal husbandry, which by the way is more important than anything with queen rearing, being able to make those selections. And maybe I'll announce something special here, Bob. So my partner Kate Anton in the EPIC program, and we just found out we got another grant to run a whole program just teaching about drones, drone production, and finding DCAs and all of those things. So we're going to have a new program. It's going to be called Dude.
I love it.
So is that an acronym?
That's awesome.
It is Deep Understanding of Drones Education Program.
There you go.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Because everyone just worries about queens, and they think the drones will just come. And I really think we can do better. We should be selecting our drone
talk a little
mothers.
bit about the EPIC program, Robyn? We spoke actually in New Orleans a little bit, and I expressed interest in it. But as you talked about it, it sounded like you were in the middle of the program, and it wouldn't be a good fit for me to try to jump in. Will you talk a little bit about what you've been doing with that? Is it a one-time shot? Are you going to repeat it? Kind of talk about your goals and then the future direction with that EPIC program.
Sure. It was kind of a one-shot deal. We've been meeting with a network of beekeepers since June of 2022. So we've been together a while. The group has really shrunk because it's a pretty intensive program. We meet a lot, we read a lot, watch a lot. But it's been fantastic, and nobody wants it to end. But we are going to end at the end of this season, and then we're just going to go right into Dude.
Right into
but
I imagine one of the coolest things about a program like that is just getting those people together that are committed to that. So when the program ends, they can actually continue that collaboration. They can network each other. They can lean on each other when they have problems. Doing it in isolation is really hard. And I think that's one of the benefits I've had through the Master Beekeeping program. Colorado's huge, but I've gotten to meet other Colorado beekeepers that are really serious about what they're doing and learning about it. So I bet that'll be a great outcome of the EPIC program too. Like people will network, and I'm sure they've already made friends with each other through all the projects and sharing and everything.
Yeah, at first we were a little bit protective of everyone, and we ran things as webinars, so they didn't get to meet each other. But a few months ago, we just opened it up, and now sometimes we just have breakout sessions where we just all talk, and so it's become that for sure.
So how would people like me who would be interested in the Dude program know about it as it's coming out?
Well, we just found out, so now we have to sort of structure the program. We'll probably write something up for American Bee Journal, inviting people to join and things like that. It's not going to start for a few months, several months. So we just kind of have to get our ducks in a row first, and then we'll be inviting people. So.
Well, if you're hiring. Just saying, I've got some skills.
Well,
Right?
Epic really helped us to like understand what we can handle too. Like people are like, "What if 2,000 people sign up?" I'm like, "That's fine." But we weren't there yet in 2022. I was like, I don't know, 200, that's all we can handle, you know? But now we understand that unfortunately the workshops are going to be in Pennsylvania, but like heck, if people want to pay for their own travel to come to a workshop, more power to you, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry about that. That's your decision.
Tony C said, you mentioned you requeened. Did you use VHS stock, not beta?
No, if you remember, I used sister queens from that colony that had lived for 4 years in a soffit and 3 years treatment free. We did not test for mite resistant traits, but we knew it had something special, but clearly not enough because they did not survive. If I could do it again, if I had a time machine, I would have.
Well, and that was also 3 years ago. So that was kind of still.
That was 6 years ago.
Well, when you started, right? 6 years ago when you started, 3 years when it ended.
Correct. Yeah, so I would have needed all of those queens in 2018. And I didn't know any breeders. I didn't know Corey, you know, like I didn't even, yeah. So we just did the best that we could.
Well, and, oh God, I swear I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you guys. You've heard my rant on that already. Both of you, all three of you have heard my rant on that. So I'm not going to do that on a stream. But yeah, so there's a whole thing with having that trusted person, you know, that's going to be a resistant stock, right? So back 6 years ago, that was not a thing that was really out there that much.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
I think at that time, Ray Oliveras was talking about a Saskatraz, and that was kind of the first that I was really hearing about a hygienic behavior and, you know, bees that were specifically segregated from everything else to hopefully have a resistant bee. So, yeah, it's hard to line things up, even when you start getting, let's say, 2,000 people for the dude studies, right? That's great, but you have to be able to trust the people that are in the study to do the study as it's laid out, right? So
yeah, it's not a research study, it's an educational program. So hopefully I can influence, you know, drone production everywhere so that there's better drones, better mating, better, and therefore better queens, better colonies, more honey. I see that all down the line.
I had toyed around with doing a nuke swap with people, and it was basically around, like, let's say you got a group of guys and everybody, I don't know, makes 10 nukes, a nuke off each one of their colonies if they have 10, and then they each just swap, right? So now you're bringing diverse genetics from different apiaries into your apiary to kind of spread the genetics around. I don't know if that is something that would be a good thing or a bad thing. It was just an idea. And then getting people that give you equivalent nukes, right?
There's queen producers here, beekeepers who produce queens here that do cell swaps. And so they'll just trade a number of cells just to make sure that genetic line isn't too vertical. About the drones, two things just came together about your presentation with the lack of Amitraz. I forget what presentation I was watching recently, and they definitely drew a line between Amitraz and not being good for drones at all. So in that organic treatment group, you know, if that's the case, then that certainly would be an offshoot that, you know, obviously your study, you know, wasn't geared to go into that detail. So that would be interesting to see.
Right. And since that study, I was so impressed by that management system that I totally stopped doing the conventional and the chemical free. Now I only do organic management. And I also like got rid of the comb from the conventional, because every box was labeled. I was like, I only want the organically managed comb. And I've just moved forward with that system. Although I have to say the drone brood removal was kind of a pain in my butt. So I've abandoned that part. I don't know that it made
You
a
need story
difference.
frames. You need the story frames.
Yeah.
It's kind of a neat system. It kind of partly came from Randy Oliver's article on that, and where he was talking about taking a frame that had part of it was free-form comb, like foundationless comb, and therefore he could just take that frame and just zip with a knife or hive tool, cut it out, back in the hive. Bob's your uncle. So that works really nice.
Yes,
It is
that would have been
messy though.
nicer.
It's not nice, not nice at all.
Brian, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that organic model, that track that you had in the middle, and particularly some of the essential oil miticide treatments. There's a couple products on the market already, but there's a lot of research on the potential of essential oils as miticides that are beyond the products on the market. Will you talk a little bit about what's currently going on as far as research in the essential oil world? I don't know how deep you are knowledgeable about that, but that's definitely an area many of us are more intrigued about as we're looking for different and a variety of treatment options.
Yeah. So, Bob, one comment you made in Manitoba, you won't like what I'm saying, but
She's going to bring me out.
as an extension educator and a university, like researcher, I only use what's registered, right? So I only use, like, I wasn't doing anything off label. I used APB oxal only for my OA vapors according to the label, even though everybody was saying you should be putting double in here. I was like, nope, I'm just going to follow the label. Only formic acid products and only APA-Guard. So that's, and also it follows the organic standards, which are currently recommendations that were made in 2010, which allows those 3 active ingredients. So that's all I've really focused on. And honestly, formic acid is my go-to, oxalic and formic. And then only if I've had to treat like multiple times will I switch over to the essential oil, the thymol, treatment. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question. You have to have somebody else on to talk about essential oils.
So I know I've played around with APA-Guard a little bit, and I'm trying to find that place where it doesn't shut the queen down. Do you know of any papers or data that might lead me into the right direction? I was just going to play around and experiment with a couple different colonies and a couple different dosages, but I'd like to gather some information first.
For this study, unfortunately, because we were using APA-VAR and you can't collect honey during that time, and it was a fall treatment, we shut our colonies down to their winter size by the end of August. And that's when we put the treatments on. And I would literally walk away and not come back for 6 weeks. So I don't know what happened in the colony during that time. I just know the result was good mite, control.
Yeah.
And I know I missed out on, like, one of my apiaries, which I still have, has the most crazy knotweed fall flow, which I now take. I can get 4 to 6 supers each off of that apiary that I completely missed with this study because there were no supers. Right? And because with APA-Guard and APA-VAR, no supers can be on. So that's a really big deal. That's like, so basically for me, this study says, yeah, you got to be on your mites, but you really don't need synthetics, right? We did it. We kept mites under control without any APA-VAR. You can do it. Everybody can do it.
And then did you have any recommendations for that chemical-free group to improve the survivability of any changes of those management practices they agreed on, or did it really come down to treating for mites?
it really came down to the mites.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I see your question.
the Morris Homestead says, when is the best time to treat your colonies? And should we be treating 2 or 3 times a year?
I'm a big proponent of treat when you need to. So I really think that monitoring is really important. Throughout that study, we didn't see many mites before July. So this is just Pennsylvania, right? So I've sort of started being a little lax early in the season with my sampling. I just assume that if I had mites under control last year, that they're not crazy. So the best time to treat is when you need to, when they're over threshold. But I really think that fall treatment is really critical. And to me, you need to get the mites under control before the winter bees are created. So for me, by the end of August, those mites need to be completely knocked down so they have all of September and part of October to make winter bees without them having holes poked in them and viruses activated, right? So when it's October and people are going on Facebook and saying, "What should I do to winterize my bees?" I'm like, go back in time and control your mites in August, right? Like it's too late. And people are like, "But I treated and they still died." Well, when? Did you wait until October or September? Like that was also too late. So the best time to treat is, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks before your queen is going to shut down for the season. So, if you can use your area to determine when that is. But for me, it's second half of August is when treatments have to occur, because by the second week of October, there's like no brood.
Hill High says, was there any noted differences between Pennsylvania and West Virginia farms? Did location play any role?
I don't think West Virginia was different, except what I didn't tell you was by the end of year 2, they didn't have enough colonies to continue in this study. So they had much worse overwintering generally in all of the treatments. I couldn't tell you why that is, but that's what happened. I do know location does matter in terms of feeding and things like that. So it did affect how much we had to feed. So it affected the economic analysis a little bit, but yeah, not too much different.
Let's see. I'm trying to read. All right. So Ian said something here. Our winter bees start mid-August into September, tight time frame right after honey flow. So
that's not a question.
That's a statement. Yeah. Well, I'm trying. See, people were having a bunch of side commentary in the chat while the discussion was coming on, while we were asking for questions. Now
that's exactly what I was thinking. It is exactly that, and it's even worse for me because Ian's on a different. We're only 100 miles apart, and he's on a different kind of a flow than I'm on. He's on more of a canola flow. I'm on more of a clover flow here, and good year I've had my clover flow go to the middle of September. Now I've learned not to try and chase that because that just messes up my winter prep. But I harvest Labor Day, right? I harvest last week of August, so I've got to get that under control.
So then I would recommend using formic acid, because you can kill the mites on the adult bees and in the cell. That's critical. That's a much faster, very sudden treatment than those other slow ones that wait for all the
worry about my honey supers.
And you don't have to worry about your honey. Yep.
Like I said, I want to fall in love with it too. So I'm really glad to get the information from you, because I was hit with Amitraz resistant mites last summer, and that was lab confirmed. And it took an incredibly huge toll on my apiary. And so synthetics are out. I'm done. So I just have to re-educate this old man on Formic Pro and whatnot.
And I've always been a fan of Apigard, but here in Colorado, I'm pulling my honey supers like mid to late July, and the temperature is still way too hot. So I'm looking for that window. I'm looking at the weather constantly. And oftentimes it gets pushed back to the point where I know it's going to shut the queen down for about a week. And I don't want her to be shut down at that time of the year because she should be making winter bees. So that's why I'm trying to find this. How can I use essential oils or some sort of essential oil treatment that's effective, but isn't going to shut the queen down at a really essential time to kill the mites, but also to prepare for winter?
So do you have a dearth?
Yeah. Yep. And
When's
no
that?
real fall flow. We get one main flow.
So what's wrong with shutting the queen down during a dearth? That seems like a great idea to me.
But during that dearth, that's when it's still really hot. So to use a product like Apogard is a tricky dance.
Apogard top temperature is pretty high. It's like 104.
Yeah, I've killed a colony or two with Apogard
Wow.
below that temperature. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I've gone down to like 25, is it milliliters? Sometimes even 20 milliliters.
You're not following the
Yeah,
label.
that's correct. That's correct.
Well, you did say that.
But I've found, I'm looking for ways to adjust it to make it work because I'm struggling with that. I want them to build winter bees, and it's worked out for me, but I've had small colonies going into winter at times, and I feel like that's been part of the consequence. So it's, am I waiting for the right weather window? Should I look for a different product? But I get the importance of the treatment at that time of the year. I get that, and I get you need a hard knockdown if you do have a lot of mites. You can't just use like oxalic to get the phoretic mites. That's not going to do enough at that time of the year.
Right.
Oops, sorry, wrong
So I
one.
don't want to say anything like many of those organic people are using Swedish shop towels during the honey flow. I don't want to say something like that, but that might be a strategy that some beekeepers would use as well, to make sure that their mite numbers in August when their supers come off aren't that high.
Right.
So Roy says, how was the pressure from other beekeepers around the test yards, or is that information that you guys knew about?
Yeah, it wasn't bad at all. But each farm had 36 colonies. So that's all, we made our own pressure. And isn't anyone going to ask me about the mite bombs?
Oh yeah, it's coming.
Well, I was
Hold
going
on.
to ask
Okay, I'm
about that
waiting.
actually.
It's coming.
You had part of your apiary was a good little mite bomb over here, so I was kind of
Yep.
wondering about that.
Here's one from the Mite Bomb Beekeeping Podcast.
That's my buddy Bruce.
Says CF colonies weren't given queens if they failed to requeen after swarming in the summer? ? What about the organic and conventional?
Yeah, nobody, no one got that. So if they swarmed or we split them, we were visiting every 2 weeks, so after 2 weeks, if we knew that they had swarmed or whatever, we wouldn't open it. We'd be like, okay, they're requeening, leave them alone. And by the next time we visited, it was one whole month, right? So we did see, several laying worker colonies in this situation. And we did the exact same thing for all the treatments in terms of the queens. We would sometimes try, to put brood in. So we were able to move brood from colony to colony within a treatment. So if there was another CF colony there, we could give brood from them, to try to get them to make a queen. So we had all of those efforts to try to save them and everything like that. But sometimes it just didn't work. And also, some of the farms were managed by a graduate student who was a little bit new and sometimes didn't do the right thing in the moment. And then I'd never heard about it until it was too late to try to get her to go back and correct. So yeah, queen loss was a problem, unfortunately. But we never purchased bees again. We never purchased any queens again. We just, that initial investment, the first year was all we did.
So once you requeened all of the colonies, if a queen died, they were on their own to requeen themselves. And if they didn't, then, and that was the same across everybody, not just treatment free. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So Tony C says, just wondering, in the treatment free group, did you see other brood disease?
In all of the treatments, we saw some sac brood, here and there in the spring. There was a few random colonies that had European foul brood. But no, in chemical free, we didn't see anything out of the ordinary, just the effects of varroa mites. Like we saw deformed wings, the snot brood, spotty brupratum, that whole thing with PMS. And we also, like, we haven't done anything with these data, but we saw when they died, because I would visit every month throughout the winter, because I wanted to know, like, are they dead by November, or did they just not squeak through from March to April? And those chemical free colonies, like, November, they were already gone.
They just gave up.
They just couldn't. Like in October, I'm like, oh, they're dead. They just don't know it yet. It was horrible.
All right. So I would love to tell you what this person's name is, but it's in a foreign language, and I don't know.
Okay.
So can he use? I assume that's oxalic acid in July. I live in North Pennsylvania.
You can. Yep. You're allowed to use it with Honey Supers on now.
Only apibioxyl.
Right. And in Pennsylvania, our honey flow is generally over by the first week in July. So you could even take off your supers and treat for best results.
Bob, Ian has a question there about RNA mite treatment.
All right.
I don't know. Don't ask me that one. I'm just going to say I don't know.
Well,
all right. All right. So that's actually the third question down. I've got two more in front of him. So hang on, Ian.
Yeah.
Robyn, what is your take on OAV on a 7-day schedule for 21 days? I know what she's going to say. It's not what the label prescribes. Yeah.
No. Now I'm going to get in trouble because I don't know the label. But I tell people that you can do oxalic acid vapor. You should do it 3 times at a 5 to 7 day interval. So I'm on board with that. 7 days for 21 days. Yeah.
All right. Was there any brood breaks on treatment free?
There were not.
So,
which is kind of why, we called it chemical free, but yeah, no, we did not do any of those other things that we could have done. Our stakeholders did not suggest that we should do that.
So the drone brood removal was the organic group,
Correct.
Not the treatment free group. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So here's the big one. How does Robyn classify RNA mite treatment? Non-chemical, but not natural acids? Would she use that mite treatment? Would she use that mite treatment product?
So, like I said, we tried to follow the organic standards, which are recommendations that were written in 2010. So they're quite out of date. I'm sure they had no idea whether they should consider this as organic or not. So that, the National Organic Program would have to make a decision on that. I personally think it sounds fantastic. I would like to use it. Is that a good answer?
I think that's a perfect answer, really.
Okay, thank you.
Because I was pondering that too, and I'm thinking it's kind of that margin that really isn't well defined in either one. It's a little bit of a new thing that we're doing in that regard, right? So it would be something that you'd have to consider. I would lean toward not organic in that opinion, because it is something that mankind created.
So it falls in line with GMO crops.
Yeah. Because if you say chemical, that's not right either, because everything's a chemical, even or formic acid is a chemical. So just putting names on things is really difficult, because not everything fits into all a nice, neat package like that. But if it's something that mankind created, I'd have a tough time calling that organic at all. But even GMO stuff is organic, right? It's from organisms. It's not rocks, right? Rocks are not organic. Plants are organic, and even GMO plants are organic, and they're not, USD certified organic products, but they're organic. Trees are organic
because they contain carbon.
Well, I don't really know the definition of that, but did
Yeah,
you
that's what
see
it
what I'm saying?
means.
Like,
Yeah.
contains carbon. See, that's
Those
the
are two
science
totally
definition.
different uses of the word organic. That's the problem.
They are, and they're used so interchangeably so often that, like, I can tell somebody that I built something in my wood shop, and I'll talk about the difficulties of building things with wood because wood is organic, and they goes, "Oh, really? You use organic wood?" Well, no, I mean it's an organic thing, right? So it's a confusing term to be used that way. Like, all plants are organic. It's, is this organic honey? Well, it came from plants, so it's organic, right?
Do you want to
Is it
talk about
certified
hive?
organic? No.
Let's talk about hive versus colony. No, let's not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, because the
Sure.
hive can't die. I'm just saying.
Right. It's
The
a
hive
house.
can't die. The hive is the house. The colony is the being.
Thank
Is
you.
the organism.
I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but Hope Sadler says, is there any difference in treating with oxalic acid through the bottom board or from the top?
I assume you're talking about vapor?
Yes.
Right? So, yeah. I mean, I tend to just trust whoever developed the method, that they tried all the different things and found the best one was to, do it from the bottom. Formic acid is better from the top because it falls, whereas OA seems to blow up. I've never tried it from the top because, that's not how I was told to do it by the label.
By the label.
Aw. Thanks, Ian.
All right, so I just had a bunch. Oh, okay. That was Brad making a comment. It went to 3, so it went in the chat.
I'm going to get kicked out for that.
I'm purposely not looking at the comments. I don't want to see what they say.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's the difference between comments and questions, and some of them are facetious questions, so they don't get brought up.
Okay.
Robyn, does the state of Pennsylvania offer any grants for beekeepers?
Generally, no. But we do have SARE, which is Sustainable Ag Research and Extension grants, and there's different regional SARE programs. We would be part of the Northeast SARE, and I know they're all around the country. They have what are called farmer grants, and I've been I don't know what the word is because it's almost my bedtime. A consultant for those quote farmers to help them with their projects, and beekeepers have been quite successful in getting money to try new things from SARE. So that's where you should be looking. The proposals are generally due in the fall so that you get the money for the following year.
And some of them just came out recently, like within the past week and month. They roll out usually every 6 months. It's a great program. In Colorado, we go through the WSARE, the Western SARE.
Yep.
Do you have any tips for someone like me who's never written a SARE grant but hopes to?
Yes,
I mean, there's
absolutely.
a lot of good guidelines on their website. They have a lot of good resources there already, but like, what else?
So grant writing is really hard and it takes a long time. So I would suggest that if you have some idea that you want to try, start trying to write a proposal based on last year's call for proposals because it barely changes, right?
Yeah.
So look at it's called an RFA. It's like they're asking for proposals. Look at last year's and start writing. Get yourself, I remember now, technical advisor at a university, and please have them read it and give you feedback, and don't be hurt when they tear it apart because they know what they're doing, right?
That's their job.
So there's a certain someone who keeps turning in SARE grants without showing it to me, and then getting all mad that that person did not get the grant, and they're starting to get all like Randy Oliver-ish and saying that, it's a conspiracy and stuff. And I'm like, stop. You never even let me read it and give you feedback. Like, don't say that you can never get a grant and whatever. Like,
Right.
it's hard. It takes time. So let me tell you a story. So no one's asked me yet what's next for the organic beekeeping research. So that was funded by OREI program. We applied. It took us 4 more tries to get the next grant, but we were persistent and we took their feedback and we kept improving the project until we finally got it. So now I'm in the middle of a project where we're using the organic management system on organic farms and really diving into whether we could possibly have certified organic products in this country, right? Because currently we cannot. Only Hawaii makes USDA certified organic products in the United States. Nowhere in the contiguous states does it happen. And we are tracking foragers using little QR codes that I'm putting on their backs and a computer system to see like how long are they gone from the colony. And there's a student at Virginia Tech who's going to match that with what the waggle dances are saying to like model whether time away equals distance. And we're mapping out all the land around the apiaries and we're doing, we're going to do testing of the wax and honey, and we're doing pollen where we're not only looking for pesticides, but we're also doing DNA metabarcoding, which allows us to know all the plants that they're visiting to collect pollen and putting that on the map around the apiaries just to see, like, if you have a really great spot and the data show us that the bees are only flying half a mile, why do we need standards where you need 3 miles, right? Which is making it impossible. So we're just now, this is like a few weeks into the monitoring of these foragers with the little QR codes. It's really a pain in my butt. Like, putting technology into beekeeping is a super bad idea, but it's the result.
Those are QR codes. You say that I would have thought that it would be a tiny RFID tag.
Well, I first played with RFID tags, and the devices that we had would just shut off if the humidity got more than 85%.
Oh, I see.
The front of your hive, you put them in full sun on purpose, right? So it's like hot and humid and horrible. So the beauty of these QR codes, number one, we can print them ourselves, right? So we don't have to keep buying them. And it's just a mini computer and a camera and some software that's making us a spreadsheet. It's like
reads that drone as the drone or
workers,
the forager.
Yep. And not only it knows like exactly when she left, and it's directional, so it knows it was an out, and then she comes back and it's an in. And
that is way too cool.
It's really not fun. It's not fun. I hate it, but it's going to be awesome data.
Do you glue them to the thorax
for a long
worker?
time loved the idea of taking that RFID and sticking it to that queen so you can pinpoint where that little girl is in the.
True. That would work well, I think. Yeah.
And then you had all your queen information on that too. Breeders it'd be great for breeders.
That would be no problem.
At what age do you put those QR codes on the bees?
So we're doing newly emerged workers, so we know.
Okay.
And then they won't be detected, for like 3 weeks, but that's okay because we're doing it every other week. We're putting more tags and more tags and more tags all season long. So come on down and glue some tags on bees with me.
Yeah.
Busy.
You see the laser thing in the barcode printer. So as they emerge, they get a barcode as they just get sprayed.
If you develop that, I will use it.
Hey, well, beekeeping's catching up with Circle K because you can go in there and put all your groceries on one scanner and it scans them all at one time and pays you. So
nice.
So your ultimate goal is to see if you can get some sort of organic certification for beekeepers, but the technology potential creates so many questions in the scientist.
Well,
Man, like,
there's going to be a
oh,
bunch of data that'll be collected that doesn't have anything to do with that you'll be able to apply to other
Yep.
instances.
yeah,
So,
like, have you
Yep.
thought about gathering other like, it must be so tempting to take that down so many different rabbit holes, but that would take you out of your focus of the project.
All
Well,
I can
I
think
mean,
of is Lloyd Harris. He'd
we have
love that
talked for
stuff.
many hours. We have talked for hours. Yeah. So I'm sure he'll be back in the conversation. But yeah, and that was one of the beauties of deciding to do the newly emerged bees, because we're going to know how old are they when they first forage, and then like I'm going to be marking down, well, they swarmed, so did like the age polyethism thing change because the the ratio of workers of different ages changed and all that stuff. Like, we're going to have the information whether I want to collect it or not. It's being collected. So yeah, who knows what we might learn.
But you could, I mean, you could do the same thing with drones to find DCA areas.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, there's so
hey,
many
see how that
amazing
plays into
potential.
the Dude project right there?
Yeah.
You're seeing it. It's all coming together.
Yeah.
Wow.
The
Ding, light
picture is
bulb.
coming clear. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
see, this is the bad part. When you leave and go to bed tonight and we stop the stream, we'll talk for
Yeah,
4
we don't-
more hours about this. We'll be up the rest of the night. Oh, well,
And
what
we're
about
not going to
this?
sleep either.
It's
at
going to
all
be
thinking about
crazy.
this. That's
So,
really exciting. That is so
So
cool.
is this the kind of technology that's only really possible in a lab setting, or is this something that can go out to like that sideliner beekeeper to actually find DCA colonies, like a small scale breeder like me looking to find those DCA yards, right? Like, I know Julia Mahood is going out to breeders and helping them find DCA areas. Could this provide that same outcome?
Yeah, so I don't know how the QR code thing would be useful. Now, radar, that would be really useful.
Okay.
But learning how to find DCAs, I think, is a really cool and fun thing to learn, right? So
Yeah.
with the Dude program, we'll be teaching that. And then I hope people find DCAs all over the place. And then they can have workshops for their clubs to teach other people how to find DCAs. And Julia's map can explode with data
Right.
points. And then we can learn more about DCAs. And then we can do research where we collect drones at DCAs. Like, just the sky's the limit. There's so much potential that I'm very
Cool.
excited about. The QR codes, I mean, we could learn about like what time of day are drones flying in different regions, stuff like that, without having to stand there and like watch the entrance. Like, wait, was that a drone? You know? So that's
Yeah.
the cool part. It's automated.
you
And
can tell what time I call shift change at the honey plant, orientation flights, what time they're on average leaving the hive in the morning to start their day, what time they're coming back, how long are they actually foraging during the day.
Exactly. And so we're working with some students, some engineering students, and their goal is to like have a complete workbook and the components you could certainly buy. So you could do this also. Like, that's their goal, is to write a paper to let others know how to do this. And so, I mean, it's going to be a few $100s of equipment, and then you have to go mark those bees. So that's the part no one's going to want to do. But if you do all those things, you also can get the same data. So I feel like that's going to be a product of this research, is just like, how do you do this? And, we could have a workshop on how to use QR codes to track bees, right? Like, so.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. It'll
Absolutely.
technology.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the guy though. I mean, hold on. Hold on, only 99 more thousand to go.
But the point of the story was, it took us 4 years of trying to get the grant to finally get the grant. So I encourage beekeepers to look into SARE. There's farmer grants where you just get the money and have to handle everything. There's partnership grants where it's like you and a university work together on things. So yeah,
There's like education grants, professional development grants. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been looking into it. I just need the time. I think I can muddle through it. I just need the time to be able to sit down and do it, and that's part of my problem.
and do it in advance so that you can share it with someone who knows how to write grant proposals and give you feedback.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
That's the key. Yeah.
Well, we've been going for an hour and 34-ish minutes, hour and a half. And I know it's getting close to your bedtime. So if nobody has questions and you need to go, feel free at any time. But you're also welcome to stay as long as you want. We just usually hang out and chat and, talk bees. But guys, this is how this went down today. The stream team said they were not going to be on today. So I was like, it might be a good time to do a stream tonight. Let me send Dr. Underwood a message, see if she's available. And I was like, she probably won't even read it, but it was hanging out there in the internet, right, in the web. And I was talking to Brad, and all of a sudden I get ding. Sure. So that's how this
she replied.
She remembered me and still replied. That's amazing.
Well, yeah. The good thing is I've given this talk like probably 100 times, so I didn't have to prepare. That's how I could make things happen quickly. I'm excited to share those 2 papers. So hopefully people see those links so you can read all that for yourself.
I did
tear it apart if you like. It's fine.
I did. Her email's not on it, so you can't send it or complaint letters.
And Bob already shared a bunch of them on the Facebook page as well this afternoon. I got a chance to look at them a little bit. So
I shared them in the chat right after the questions. I put them all 3 in there, so you might have to scroll up in the chat to see them. But they are in the Facebook group, so you can go there and check it out.
And then the one is, if you liked the data that you saw and you want to try the organic management system, there's an extension document that's a fact sheet that gives you all the details, when we did what, that if somebody wanted to try it for yourself, you should be able to, following that. And, a lot of new beekeepers are like, just tell me what to do and when to do it. And that's kind of the document. I'm like, try this. If you have success, then you can tweak it, right? Like, try exactly what this says. And if you like it or you don't like it, take out drone brew removal, or, add a screen bottom board. Maybe I probably would, if I were you, use a screen bottom board, etc. So it's finally a document that says what to do when, I think. But
that's like a running joke whenever someone comes on here and says, well, Bob said this. I always know it. They're not speaking about me. They're talking about Bob Benny. So
you thought it was Benny emailing you.
Yeah, you thought it was Bob Benny sending you a message.
You're too polite to say that that's the case, but
and Dr. Underwood, that
Bob
article
Benny wants to be on his channel.
The article you referred to even takes that beekeeper through the entire season, right? So it tells them kind of what to do, when to do, using that organic model. And I think that is a great place to start for beekeepers who are looking for some guidance and giving it a shot and deciding what you like, and like you said, what you might want to tweak and change and what you might want to incorporate into your management system. I think that was one of those articles that I think, some of them are really researchy and university based, and some of that reading isn't so accessible to everybody. But that one in particular is a great one for the backyard beekeeper to get started on thinking about that IPM stuff.
And just remember, you have to apply that to your geographical location.
Right.
Because we're talking northeastern United States. So that timing is going to be different from South Carolina or Florida or Georgia, Colorado, wherever you're at. So just make those adjustments as needed. And you should have a good shot there.
Yep.
Well, we definitely appreciate it, and hopefully you will come back again. I know you have to absorb what happened here. And you guys don't know the stories, but Dr. Underwood and I were both at the Manitoba Beekeeper Association meeting, and she stayed a few days with a friend after the seminar. And I stayed with Brad and visited with Ian and a couple of days afterwards. So it just happened that we were both on the same initial leg flight from Manitoba to Toronto. And who do I see immediately at like 5:30 in the morning, just getting her a cup of coffee? And I'm wound up, right? So I'm like, oh, and she started talking bees, and she's like,
Hey.
no. No, it's too early. But she was a trooper, and she hung in there with me until the plane boarded. But
That's a good memory.
Yeah, good memories, and that's why she was so happy in that photo. That's the thumbnail on the video. She's like, "We're boarding. I don't have to sit with them anymore." But we appreciate it, and hopefully we can get you to come back and share more interesting stuff with us. And don't be a stranger. We do this all the time. I mean, so anytime you just want to hang out, and even if it's just listen, be that person in the background. We go down rabbit holes and do all kinds of things, and then you can email me and tell me how stupid my idea was afterwards, and I won't take offense to it.
Sounds great. All right, I'm signing off.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Underwood.
So that was very interesting.
That was a treat. That certainly was a treat. There's so much in that presentation. I'm going to watch that over and over because there is so much in there, relationships and causes and effects and whatnot. And that's a great presentation.
Well, and that's 3 years worth of data, right? So it's not one season, one time. It's a reoccurring thing where all of the systems were treated identical, right? So, it allows you to get the 10,000 foot view of different things, right? So I'll be honest with you. I was really surprised when I saw that the first time, and that the synthetic treatments and the organic treatments were virtually identical results. I was surprised to see that, because for some reason, I think in our minds, when a product or something's out there and it's a chemical, we assume it's going to work better for some reason. But
I think a lot of us do. I would agree with that. Personally, though, having seen particularly things like oxalic acid vapor and dribble, and formic acid, the effects of them, how well they work and whatnot, I really wasn't surprised to see that. And then I have to back up and I think, okay, well, why are we using things? We talked about this. Why do what do I like about Apivar? Because I don't hate the whole thing, right? There are things I really like about Apivar. I can put Apivar in a colony in the 1st of April and leave it in there until the middle of May, and it doesn't matter what the temperature is outside.
right.
And I put it in, and then I take it out, right? I'm not going every 4 to 7 days to blast oxalic acid vapor. I'm not waiting for the right temperature to be high enough and low enough to use formic acid. All of these things, right? Apivar is extremely ideal in so many ways, except no honey supers. You can't put that in the 1st of October, not in my country, because
Right.
you got to take it out in the middle of November, and that's not going to happen. I think just the control and the fact that when, going back to last night's presentation of Formic Pro, I think they've done a really good job with that substrate that they use to moderate the off gas of formic acid, because I know just formic acid alone on a dry lock pad or something similar is a little trickier to use. And I'm not suggesting anybody do that, because I realize that most of our audience here is from the United States, which is not a label usage for formic acid. Canada, we can do that.
Well,
so it's ease of use, really.
But see, that brings us to a very interesting topic, and you know, and we've discussed it, right? So we've got treatments and they have labeled usage. This is how you use it by the directions. But inherently, when a product comes out, we'll see, oh, we can use oxalic acid. Well, what happens if we take the oxalic acid and we do a dribble, or we put it with something else? And
what if we put in orange juice? What if we,
yeah,
it's always
but,
somebody going to do something different.
Right. So, well, we've got formic strips and we can put 2 on, or we can do 1 and then 10 days later we can do another one. So what happens if we cut them in half and we put 1 on each corner, or we put 1 on every level, or we put 4 on every corner? It's like, when is enough enough? When is it okay to let the researchers and the people developing products do their job? They developed a product. Does it work? Does it not work? Do it the way they say. Why can't we just have a product or products, and that's how we do it? I mean, it's because for me, that's kind of the thing, right? So I like Apivar strips. Same reasons. I don't have to worry about the temperature. I can put them in. If I forgot to take them out, it's okay. They're dead now. There's no.
The label is easy. The worst part about Apivar is ripping the 2 strips apart, which is kind of
right. So
that easier.
But the thing is, every time there's a new treatment or something comes out, or there's always something about that somebody says, oh, well, it's not as I would prefer it. It's not about what I prefer. It's about what's best to help the bees, right? In my preference, if I had my absolute preference, I wouldn't use any of it. Bees just live and do your thing, and if you make it, great.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right? Nobody wants to put the money in it, but that's not the situation we're in, right? So we have to be
having a product we talk about Formic Pro a lot. I mean, last night we talked a lot about it, which is great, Formic Pro. But this is just an example, and it's a really good example of a product and again, oxalic acid, right? Well, you take oxalic acid and you put so many grams and blah, 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 blah. Well, give me a strip that looks like an Apivar strip and let me drop that in. So take away the opportunity for me to overdose that colony unless I want to put too many strips in. Formic Pro is exactly that. If I want to do in Canada, and I can do this, take a dry lock pad, put it on my colony, squirt a bunch of formic acid on it from a jug. I could put a half a gallon of formic acid on a colony. Oh, it's going to kill my bees. We know that. But the point is, this Formic Pro formulation is a substrate and a measured dose of formic acid, so that been tested, right? It has this effect on the mites. It has this effect on the bees. This is the timing that you want to leave that in there, and so all of that is worked out for you. And I think I'm trying to agree, kind of what you're saying there, Bob. Is we need to be thankful for that kind of thing.
Right.
Experimenting and doing the cowboy thing. Really, you don't learn unless you try things, right? But
I mean, I agree with that. Right?
Off-label use.
And you guys know I'll try whatever, right? If it's going to help, I'll try it. I'm not opposed to it. But the thing is that the water gets muddied, I guess is the best way to say it, right? So Brian and I had a discussion on the phone earlier today about the UBO testing, right? It's what we have, right? It's what we have. But
what we have.
It's as clear as mud. Everything that we do is clear as mud, right? You do it. This is what it says to do. But now it's like, well, did this mean this, or does this mean that? Or, that's the whole gray area that is sometimes hard to discern when you're in your apiary and it's 100 degrees outside and you got sweat dripping down your glasses and you're trying to do whatever you got to do because you have to do it 80 more times or 100 more times, or in Ian's case, 1,500 more times. it's the simplicity of some things. We make it harder on ourselves, and
Yeah.
and I think that sometimes we need to yes. So you know, I applaud all these people that are doing the research, but the thing is sometimes you know, like you said with the oxalic acid vaporization, you got to pick which side of the fence you're gonna be on, right? Either you're gonna follow the labels and the directions, or you're not. But if you don't, you have to know that the results you get are your results, right? They're not necessarily what the product is saying that it'll do. So, like if it says 2 grams of oxalic acid and you're using 4 or 6, you're going to get different results than what it says. Might be better, might be worse, right? But you can't say, well, I'm doing this legally, but I'm only doing it legally if it suits me, right?
You don't always know what effect that is having either. You might say,
Right.
look, my bees are fine. I put 6 grams oxalic acid vapor on my bees are fine. My mite level's low, right? It worked and it did the job and it didn't hurt my bees, didn't it? Are you sure? There's all kinds of things that it could have done. You don't know. You don't know. I mean, over time, if it's always working for you, then I mean, the test of time, like they say, but you don't know. Are
Well,
you going to do something that compromises the sperm viability of your drones or the sperm viability in your queen? Like, are you going to do something like that? Are you going to do something like put something in your hive that's going to affect your bees might look fine, but the life longevity of your bees, maybe their ability to feed or their ability to forage, you can't test that. How do you test your bees' ability to forage? That's pretty hard to do. And so there's all kinds of these nuances that you don't necessarily know. So you always got to back up, like don't fall in love with your own ideas, right? It's kind of
right.
what I'm saying. Is do something you can see, hey, you know, that had an effect that I really liked. I got to watch around the edges here and make sure there's no other crazy stuff going on because I'm forging new ground here.
Well, you made
I'm cutting a new path.
a very good, I thought it was an interesting statement when we were talking about formic acid earlier, and you said, do we know that formic acid is what kills the queens, or is it the bees killing the queen because they can no longer smell or the pheromone of the queen and assume she's defective and kill?
And I didn't think of that. Came up in the comments last night, and I didn't think of that. I thought, you know what, that's a really good point, because you could do a lot of stuff that makes the bees think, well, the queen's got to go, and they off the old girl, right? Which has nothing to do, maybe nothing to do with formic acid directly. It's not. Maybe it's not formic acid that's killing your queen. Maybe it's your bees killing your queen because they don't like it, or something. You know.
Right.
So there's all kinds of nuances there. There's pheromones involved. There's the sensory of these bees is so incredible that you disrupt that. And don't mistake, you put formic acid in a colony, that's a disruptor. Holy cow, that's a disruptor.
Brian's being quiet over there. I see the wheels turning. He's formulating his next question.
Just waiting my turn. I got stuff to say. I'm
I
just
need to
waiting my
start-
turn.
I need to start bobbing and weaving now.
Body
blow.
I still have half of a cookie left, so I can eat it. But you know, I think I had a different path of learning how to treat mites, and I was thinking about this as we were having this conversation. I think a lot of the voices of the clubs I went to at the beginning were warning me against the synthetics from the fluvalinate and Kumafos stories. So I never looked at Amitraz. I used it once when I helped out some lady with her hives because she had the product. And I pulled it out of the package and I'm like, I don't smell anything. Is this even right? Like it was like I wasn't even sure I was doing it right. That's the only time I ever used it. I always used thymol, oxalic. I've only used formic once or twice, so I've got to dig a little bit more into it. So as I saw Robyn study, which this isn't the first time I've seen that presentation or that data, I wasn't surprised at all because that was the life of the beekeeper I lived. You know, I went from the first couple years trying to be treatment free, seeing how that was going to work, and then figuring out IPM. And then I was exposed to the IPM pyramid pretty early in my beekeeping career as well. And that was a framework of thinking I wrapped my head around pretty quickly as well. So that was a big key in my success. But and then I want to say something about treatments too. I bend the label, and I'm gonna say bend the label for a couple of reasons. Because I understand how difficult it is to change the label, even with additional data that backs changing the label. I understand the difficulty of that process. And there are times where I'm looking at other data to support me bending the label. I don't just bend it willy-nilly, right? I look at something that's going on like maybe Randy Oliver's doing with some slow release studies or something that's peer reviewed or some sort of study based that I might go, maybe I can tweak this to make it work for my situation. Every situation hasn't been tested by those people who put out those products.
Right.
So there's going to be situations that the label's not going to apply to. So sometimes it's got to be on that skilled beekeeper to be able to do that with the label. And this is what I tell people about the rules of beekeeping as well. Beginning beekeepers need to know those rules, and it's really helpful to have those rules. But they aren't really rules, they're guidelines. And the more skilled you get and the more you understand that they're guidelines, the more malleable they are, the more you can manipulate those guidelines and break that rule that the 101 book tells you. And I think that's the same with treatments. If you're wise about it, you can bend the label for an intelligent and thoughtful situation. And that's
Right.
all I'm going to say. That's my soapbox.
So if you're not sure if you're intelligent, don't bend the label, is what you're saying.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Brian says he enjoys the science type chats.
I really like these formats too, where you have an expert in, and then it gets to go into conversation. I think it's really deep thinking kind of stuff.
I enjoy it as well. It's one of those things to where sometimes we're lucky to have people we can get on, and it just so happened that this week we were able to get two. I don't often search and destroy people to come on the stream, right?
Masquerade is Bob Binney, so they say yes.
Yeah, I just need to change my screen name to Bob Binney, and we'll have everybody coming in.
We are so fortunate in what we do, and there's an industry here that the scientific community is supporting, but the sideliner and hobby side of this too just comes right along with the whole thing, and so fortunate to have access to these studies and these scientists, these doctors and these universities and all these people doing this research and coming up with all of this information for us. And I don't know if there's any other even hobby, if you want to call it that. For a lot of us it is a hobby, that has that. It's just incredible.
It's it's an anomaly, at least on the YouTube side of things, right? So I've been fortunate to go to a few conventions, or I call them conventions, but seminars, and the Manitoba Beekeeper Association meeting stood out for me above the others that I've been to. And for the pure reason that it was very well organized. There was a lot of great speakers, but it wasn't so huge that you didn't see Dr. Robyn Underwood grabbing her salad at lunchtime. And while you're standing in line with her and Corey Stevens, you're actually having a bee conversation while you're grabbing your lunch. And, you know, or you run into Dr. Underwood at the airport and 5:30 in the morning, you're having a bee discussion, right? They weren't.
Or sitting there having my lunch and Dr. Purnell sits down next to me and chit chat the whole time.
Right. It was very accessible
Just awesome.
people.
Awesome.
And some, I haven't been to a bunch. I've been to a few, but some of them that are bigger, or maybe I'm the smaller fish, so nobody gives a crap or whatever. I understand. I get that. But it's YouTube community. We seem to share information, good, bad, indifferent, better. I don't know if it's better because I'm not like in the local club, right? So it's we have a Facebook group. A lot of us have each other's phone numbers and emails and stuff like that. So we communicate probably more than other things. You know, I've done other ventures and stuff, and people really didn't communicate outside of our meeting, right? And with YouTube and the entire community, it's just that I can pick up the phone and call Brian, and Brian will either answer the phone if he wants to talk to me, or he'll, you know, swipe me left and get me out of there, you know, that type of thing. but the chances are, if I call Brad Hogg, if Brad's not busy, he's going to pick the phone and say, Bob Walker, you know, because that's his thing for me. So, I mean, it's just everybody's accessible, right? Everybody's willing to share that information because at the end of the day, we all want our bees to live and to survive, right? And that's the common goal of beekeepers, I think. But sometimes in other
beekeeper doesn't love to talk bees, right? That's a universalism, pretty much. What beekeeper doesn't love to talk? I'm on admin group in a lot of Facebook groups, and so I get to approve new members and whatnot. And if I want to look, if I look at an application and I think, I don't know if this person's really, you know, fits the bill, and I can look at their profile. If they don't have one bee picture on their profile, then it's like, you're not serious.
Right.
Because what beekeeper doesn't have a bee picture on their Facebook profile?
It's
It's
true.
universal.
It is true. Anyway, guys, we've been going for right at 2 hours, and I appreciate all of you that came and supported Dr. Underwood and the channels because we multi-streamed to, I think, 5 different locations tonight. Two different bee associations, Brad's channel, my channel, on both YouTube and Facebook. And, you know, we still have 100 people watching at the moment, and we appreciate it. Brian, thank you for the super chat. Everything helps out. And
hey, I'd love to hear about Tom Bacon's experience with the EPIC program at some point. I know he's been doing a lot with that. That might be another good conversation for another night.
yeah, we'll get him on. He's always welcome. Most of the time, you guys, you know, we share the link and let people come in. But sometimes when we have special guests, we don't do that just because we could have 12 people in here. And then we don't want to first overwhelm somebody with 12 different questions. And there's no, I hate to say control, because I'm not, you know how we are. We don't care. But the speaker may care. So that's why we do it that way on these nights. So we appreciate everybody that showed up and supported us, and we really appreciate you guys. And we'll see you on the next stream. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
You got to click it off. I don't have the control.